Hello, folks, and good evening, or good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're from. Tonight I have two very special guests joining me, and these guests are Doctors Julie and Rob Hamilton.
Hey.
And there they are. Hey, what's up, guys?
Okay, so this is why we hate social media, but
It's like, here we go.
all right, we're going to reposition the phone here and get to work. Sorry about the trouble, folks.
Hey, no worries. You guys made it. So welcome, Julie and Rob. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you. Sorry,
Hey.
I'm just fixing the tripod there.
Okay, so this
Hello.
is I guess we're going to have to sit closer together.
Okay, yeah, get nice
Okay.
and cozy. Cuddle up.
So sorry about that.
No problem. Perfect. Hey, so welcome, guys. Hey, thanks so much for joining me tonight. And why don't you guys start off by just kind of sharing your story with us, kind of like how you got into medicine, and then kind of your transformation into doing what you're doing today. So, Julie, do you want to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. How I got into medicine, that's a long story. Something I thought of ever since I was working in a vet's office, and then got steered towards human medicine during high school years. Went to a liberal arts college, didn't have to major in anything medical or anything scientific, so I didn't. Focused from then on towards medicine, I guess, for however many years it's ever been since then. So I started out in emergency medicine. I loved a lot of just tons of fields. I really love the acuity and the procedures and making a difference in people's lives. We had 3 children in pretty rapid succession, and at the same time when they were still young and crazy lifestyle we were leading, Rob was traveling a lot for work. So I sort of ended up steering myself towards wound care and hyperbaric medicine, was doing both careers for a long time, and in the last few years just started focusing on wound care medicine. So that's really become my passion.
Okay. Excellent.
My wife is very modest. Her liberal arts college was Harvard and her medical school was Stanford. So she's much smarter than I am, turns out. And I always was.
Hey, Julie,
fascinated.
real quick question for Julie. So, by the way, thanks for the book, guys. Really awesome book here. Highly recommend it. But
thank you.
You know, Julie, I was reading your bio, and one of the things that kind of really stood out to me is not so much like a lot of wound care specialists focus on the wound, and your whole philosophy is to focus on the person and the underlying cause of the wound. So what kind of got you to that point in your career where you kind of shifted your focus to the person as a whole rather than just the specific wound?
Sure. You know, that's a great question. I really feel like when I transitioned into the wound care world from just being an ER doctor, what I really loved the most about it was that I had time with each patient. Instead of being frenetically running and, you know, patient load of 15 at a time, racing here and there and hoping I'd get back to update each patient each time and talk to the family members and always going home at the end of a shift feeling like I should have done more, could have done more. I all of a sudden was one at a time, and it was very controlled. And although I've always thrived on chaos, I found that that gave me a chance to really delve into their problems much deeper. And more importantly, the continuity of care that I finally had, which I never had in emergency medicine. So I see my patients every single week. So today, I think I saw about 17 patients in the morning half-day clinic that I did, and they were maybe 15 follow-ups and 2 renews. And it's sort of that every week you get a chance to rebuild on what you've been telling them and follow through with, you know, did they take my advice or not? And what else can I, you know, lead them towards the light each week and help them heal. So I really love that about it. And I think that's really what led my journey to the point where I could say, you know what, I could do this full time.
Okay.
So I gave up the ER, which was a little hard, but I don't think I have any regrets.
Okay. So how long ago was that when you made that transition?
Oh gosh, I did both jobs since 2009. Is that right?
I think you.
And I gave up in about 2012.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I started the wound center maybe in 2006. Anyway, it's been a while.
Okay. Awesome. Rob, how about you? What's your story?
Wow. So I got interested in medicine because my mother was a nurse and my dad was an organic chemistry professor who always wanted to be a doctor. And I was actually fascinated early on by technology, got into electrical engineering, was fascinated by the digital world, et cetera, despite my apparent inability to use Facebook. But I eventually, after getting a degree in electrical engineering, I decided I wanted to go to medical school because I really valued connecting with people and trying to help them. So like Julie, I went into emergency medicine because of the acuity and the variety. I really enjoyed the variety of it. But about 5 years ago, I guess it's now 6 years ago, in 2012, my father was dying of cancer, and I was realizing that modern medicine did not have most of the answers. And we have a few answers. We know a few things. There's no question if you're in a, if you're hit by a truck, you probably need a modern emergency physician and a surgeon and a neurosurgeon and an orthopedist and all that. But if you're trying not to become ill, if you're trying to maximize and optimize your health, if you're trying to not get cancer or fight it off, then you need a different approach than we're offering in modern medicine currently. So I went off and I did a fellowship in anti-aging and regenerative medicine and a fellowship in stem cell therapy and some other training. Actually, in 2012, I started getting led down this alternative medicine kind of rabbit hole by finding a physician on the internet who some of you may have heard of, Dr. Jack Kruse, who is an amazing mentor and has been kind enough to write the foreword for our book. And he started opening my eyes and subsequently Julie's eyes to the things that medicine doesn't even see right now. And so the more we study about what we've learned during this pathway, the more we know how to help people. So it's really exciting. And and we eventually realized that every single patient Julie sees in the wound clinic will benefit from quantum health principles. Every one of those people is a disaster. They're, as doctors probably shouldn't, but we euphemistically refer to these people as train wrecks. They've all got diabetes and vascular disease, and they're rapidly aging, and they have terrible redox potentials, and their vitamin Ds are horrible, and their deuterium levels are high, et cetera. And we realized that we could get together and bring something different to the wound care to all those folks with chronic wounds. And it doesn't even take that much to move some of those people towards health.
Right,
right.
So
bad. You can make a huge difference.
I love it. So how did you guys come across Jack Kruse?
Well, that's my fault. Back in 2000, in January, I remember this very well, actually. Like I say, my father was very ill. I was looking for solutions. And, the thing about a lot of people is, and especially a lot of doctors I know, is we're trying to help ourselves. I'm still working on myself. And I think all of us on this kind of a video are working on ourselves. That's why we're here. That's why we're seeking more information about health. So I came across this thing called the Paleo Diet. I was late to the table. It's been around for a few years. I came across a thing that I think Sean Croxton was putting on.
Okay.
It was a paleo summit online, and I heard the speech. I heard a talk by this Dr. Kruse guy, and I was fascinated. First of all, because I couldn't understand about half of what he was getting at. I still remember him talking about eating a banana in Calgary in winter being a biologic mismatch, and that struck me as incredibly true, but I didn't really get it. And so I started reading his blogs, and in the middle of February that year, he started talking about cold thermogenesis, and I happened to be working at home at the time, and I thought, well, this seems like a great idea. So I went out and jumped in the lake. We are fortunate enough to have a lake next to our home, and it was about 50 degrees, and I jumped in, and I came right back out. And the next day, I thought, well, he says you can do it. I'll try to do it longer. So I went in, and I was in for a minute and a half, and then I went in for maybe 2 minutes, and then pretty soon I could be swimming around in our lake in the middle of winter in Northern California, which granted is not that cold, but it's cold. And then, of course, a few days later, he published the thing saying, this is the easy start guide to cold thermogenesis. Don't just jump in, dunk your face, do this, use ice vests, etc. So, but I kind of started down that pathway and started learning a lot, and that got me started wanting to do the anti-aging fellowship and learn more.
Excellent. Yeah. So you were pretty much all in from the start then.
Well, I was either desperate or crazy or just, all in, definitely.
He was crazy.
Hey, how about you, Julie? Did you take a plunge in the pond too?
No,
Late?
no. Unfortunately, he's the crazy one. I think I was just in survival mode most of the time. I tend to juggle the children and the ranch and the 7 dogs and cats and donkeys and all that. So I pretty much would hear what he was up to. And if we were on a long road trip, Rob would all of a sudden pop in a Jack Kruse podcast, and I'd be like, wait, rewind that, play that again. Because I'd catch bits and I'm like, I got to figure this out. And I'd always want to hear more, but I just never myself listen to podcasts and have the time to read and do social media. So I learned through him, fortunately. I hope someday when things calm down and the kids are out of the house, I'll have a lot more time.
Right. Cool. I love it.
To fix myself, I should say.
Yeah, totally. So I always love hearing how people kind of come around and have their own personal transformation from kind of like the mainstream stuff that everyone's doing to this kind of, stuff that's far ahead, just that's very just natural, right? Getting in touch with nature, getting more sunlight, jumping in a cold lake.
It is.
Walking barefoot on the earth, very simple stuff.
Yeah.
It's made me realize, physicians are in general very well-meaning people and very bright. And I think they just get focused on what our training teaches us. And that's all is the mainstream approaches, the techniques, the pharmaceuticals. It's either, you're operating on someone or you're prescribing pharmaceuticals. And so to no fault of their own, if they don't take the sleep that Rob did and kind of led me down that whole approach and start figuring out there's so much more out there, they don't really know any better. So every day in my clinic, I'll have a new patient came in today. He has no feeling in his legs because of diabetes and neuropathy. He has had a callus on his foot since it came off, I believe, 3 months ago. And he's like, there was a hole there. And it didn't bother him because he doesn't feel it. And he's walking around in the ill-fitting shoes that caused this. And I'm thinking when I see him today, all the underlying issues going on in his body. And of course, he's on 13 medications a day and he's not checking his blood sugars. His doctor said he didn't have to. He doesn't know his, test results recently that they took. It's sort of like if I don't feel it, I don't have to worry about it. And here I am looking at his foot thinking to myself, dear God, there is a bone infection and I'm getting an MRI, today because it's just like he should have come in to see me 2 months ago.
Right.
I think the other thing that we've both seen as we've been in medicine, I hesitate to say, but I graduated from residency in 1999. Things have changed dramatically. People are sicker now than they used to be at a younger age. I remember when I was in residency, type 2 diabetes was a disease of 80 and 90-year-old people, and maybe an occasional 70-year-old. And now, and I still work a few shifts in the emergency department, and that, it's not uncommon for a third of the patients I see during my shift to be diabetics between, 40 and 70, and 2 or 3 people in their 30s and even in their 20s to be type 2 diabetics. And most of those people are on multiple medications, if they're on medication at all. They have all these doctors prescribing them statins and antihypertensives and various glucose control agents, and yet you talk to them and nobody's ever talked to them about, changing their lifestyle. They just say, well, here's a pill. Yeah. And it's not working. Our healthcare system, and you can see where the costs are. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's completely broken. Yeah. Well, Rob, you made the comment in your book that the U.S. population is getting sicker faster now than ever before. Could you kind of share some stories of what, you shared a little bit just now about what you're seeing in the ER, but let me ask you, what do you think are some of the main drivers of that? Why are people getting sick younger and faster than ever before?
Well, that's not as hard as it seems. It's a combination of their lifestyles. And so what does that mean? That means their light environment, their circadian mismatches. They're staying up half the night on TVs and computers and iPhones. It's a terrible diet. They're eating just terribly. If you look at the average patient in the ER, they'll be sitting there coming in for abdominal pain, eating a bag of Cheetos or a cheeseburger and complaining that they can't keep anything down.
That they bought at the hospital, right?
Correct. And then, of course, what we're seeing even more of is I'm sure that the EMF environment is getting worse and worse and worse. 2006 was when the iPhone came out, and of course we're using it to do this Facebook Live. But it's a great tool, but when overused, it can completely destroy your life. Our son tells us stories. He's 16, and he's actually a tremendous role model for both of us, because he's got his blue blocking glasses on at dusk. He goes to
good
bed
for
at
him.
9. He sleeps through the night.
Nice.
But yeah, but his friends are up texting at 2 and 3 in the morning.
Right.
And they complain they can't sleep. And Julie's been interviewing kids for college that tell her that they're getting up, taking coffee, and taking sleeping pills at night to sleep. And these are high school kids.
Wow.
So those are some factors.
Yeah, all you have to do, and especially if you have children, is just look around at the school when you pick your kids up. I mean, the statistic right now is 1 in 3 American adults are obese. And that's shocking enough. But to me, 1 in 5 children, which is adolescents, ages 2 to 19, 1 in 5 is obese.
Wow.
And that is just shocking to me.
Yeah, it breaks your heart.
It breaks your heart. And, you see it. Our youngest child is on a year-round swim team. And it's great that these parents are getting their kids on a, swim program every day to help them. And some are definitely losing weight. But I was a swimmer, and the kids didn't look like that when I was growing up. Even that what they call fat skinny, the flabby, they might not be overweight, but they're not muscular toned. They're pale. Their vitamin D levels are probably in the toilet. They're getting poor sleep. So many kids these days, they're addicted to their devices. I mean, we know it's addictive. They are on them constantly. They don't turn them off at night. They don't take them out of the bedroom at night. So we hear the stories from picking up our kids' friends, having overnights, and they're saying, "Why are your lights orange? What's going on in your house? And why is your Wi-Fi not turned on? We can't access our Netflix on our phone." And it's interesting. So it's a chance to kind of talk to them about why. And, our kids are kind of used to it now. They don't get so embarrassed. Our 16-year-old is certainly good about it and trying to make a difference among his peers.
Yeah.
But they're not sleeping well because they're up, either doing homework till 1 in the morning or on social media or watching Netflix on their phone.
Right.
And I think, as Jack Kruse will tell you, every time that phone dings, that's blue light. Your brain is saying it's noon. You're not going to have melatonin released. You're not going to be sleepy. So they take sleeping pills to fall asleep because they realize they got to get up at 5 or 6. And then the next morning on the way to school, they're stopping at what we call Dutch Bros, sugary, caffeinated drinks, drinking Red Bulls, and going back again in the afternoon for a second one. And it's just this cycle. It's really sad.
Yeah.
It concerns me a lot, actually.
Yeah, so it sounds like the emergency rooms are going to start seeing just younger and younger people showing up there. And
we are.
I shared this story with you guys when we talked the other night, but a very close relative of mine got a stroke. I went to the emergency room to be there with him, and I was just kind of looking around. It was a packed emergency room. Like in the hall,
Yep.
There were just people lined up waiting to be seen. I didn't see a single bone break or somebody that had been in an accident or they cut their hand cooking dinner or fell off a ladder. It was all people who just didn't take care of themselves, and it all seemed to be preventable stuff. So are you seeing a lot of stuff like that in your emergency rooms too? Hey, real quick, thanks so much for checking out my video, and I hope you're getting lots of value and learning some cool stuff. If you're having challenges with your health, I can help. The main thing I help my clients with is improving their energy at the cellular level. So I'm talking about your mitochondria. And what we know from the latest research is that 85 to 90% of all disease is caused by poor mitochondrial function. So when you fix your mitochondria, you improve your energy and everything gets better. If this is something that you'd like help with, there's a link to my calendar in the description below. Go ahead, you can schedule time for us to talk, and if it looks like we're a good fit, I'll tell you about my program, and if it's something you want to do, we can start working together. I look forward to meeting you, and now, back to the video.
Absolutely. I mean, that's just I worked Saturday and Sunday this last weekend, and it's a constant parade of chronic illness, acute exacerbations of chronic illness. So it's people with diabetes and vascular disease and heart disease that are coming in with, chest pain and shortness of breath. It's emphysema, asthma exacerbations. It's influenza in people who've got the flu shot. It's it's just, there's very little traumatic injury. I mean, traumatic injury, like I say, is something that you probably can't fix with changing your light environment, right? You need a little more than that, although in the recovery period, that. But a lot of what we see is just people who are chronically ill that just get a little bit sicker. They're coming in for minor complaints or even major complaints that could have been prevented if they would have changed their course and their lifestyle 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 years ago. And that's a standard shift. You know, last time I worked, I saw a 47-year-old who had a cardiac bypass 10 years ago for a heart attack. So 37 years old, this gentleman had a bypass surgery. And that's not very common, but it's out there all the time.
How about the young woman with Crohn's disease? Yeah,
and another a young lady with Crohn's disease who, you know, was seeing gastroenterologists and is being put on, you know, $50,000 a year's new fancy expensive pharmaceuticals. But she told me she'd been seeking other ideas, and she talked to her gastroenterologist, and he said, well, it doesn't matter what you eat. It doesn't matter how you live. You just need this drug. So, you know, obviously, unfortunately, allopathic physicians have become the marketing arm of the pharmaceutical industry to an extent. There are important pharmaceuticals that have value, but we're not looking for the root cause of these things. Instead, we're looking for pharmaceutical solutions, and that's what's been driving medicine.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, so you mentioned before that you saw a couple of people show up that had the flu, and I read a couple articles that the flu was just really bad in certain parts of California, and there are hospitals that are just maxed out. They can't take in more patients. Are you guys seeing that where you are? And how many of those people, do you have an idea how many of those people actually had the flu shot?
You know, it's hard to know for sure who had it and who didn't. I mean, you can ask. There's a lot of anecdotal stuff. In our part of the state, it's not terrible right now. I have colleagues in Southern California who've set up tents outside their emergency rooms. And they literally have, you know, 30 and 40 people in the tent, and they, you know, everybody's got the flu. We've had about a 40% uptick in volume over the last month. So that's a lot, but I mean, we don't have a tent yet. And of the people that I've seen, and I don't work in the ER that much anymore, thankfully, but the people that I've seen that have the flu, probably 10 or 15% have said they had the flu shot, at least. And we know that it's not been terribly efficacious this year. And I don't think it's probably ever very efficacious. Unfortunately, every year they say that, well, we just missed the mark a little bit. And of course, you have to be concerned about getting the same vaccine every year with all the heavy metal additives and such. So I worry about that. And we both know a couple hospital personnel that have had flu shots and gotten terribly ill with autoimmune problems afterwards. Yeah. And we're told, well, it's not a big deal. It can't be related to the shot. And, you know, the more I learn, the more I realize it's not true at all. So,
wow. Hey, so any ideas, you know, what's driving these high levels of flu and why so many people are getting hit so hard with it?
That's a Jack Kruse.
Yeah.
No. it's a solar cycle. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that, you know, because people have low redox potentials, they're unhealthy. I mean, the average, when I see people in my anti-aging practice, the average vitamin D is about 20. So, and of course, people say, well, then I'll just take more vitamin D. And I say, no, the right way to get vitamin D is the sun. And of course, it's winter in Northern California. It's not snowing outside right now, but I tell people to go to a tanning booth 2 to 3 times a week and try to get their vitamin D levels up. But I bet you if I tested every patient I saw with the flu, their vitamin Ds would be less than 30.
Yeah.
You know, people aren't getting the UV light they need. Most of them are eating very poorly. They're not even close to being ketogenic in the winter. And they're spending half the night watching their devices. So that's, I mean, I think it all just kind of counts to dropping your redox potential and making you more susceptible to those diseases.
Yeah.
I'm no expert on infectious disease or Lyme disease, for example, but I see a lot of Lyme patients now. And there are people that test positive for Lyme that don't have any symptoms, and there are those that have lots of symptoms. And it depends on their general state of health and their redox potential before they get the disease. You know, just having the pathogen around isn't sufficient. It's having a body that's susceptible to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can totally relate to that. I was down in DC for 20 years and I had declining health over a period of 10 years, and I found out I had Lyme disease. And I've been symptom-free for years now, but one of the things I did was I got the hell out of DC because I was just surrounded by so many EMFs, and I had recovered quite a bit, but I just, you know, from learning about all the stuff that Jack teaches, I kind of got to the point where if I want to get better, I've got to get out of this environment. And it's made all the difference in the world. Even though I went north, the sun is slightly less strong. I'm in a pretty rural area, so I'm not getting blasted with all those EMFs. Right. But it's, you know, I do find it very interesting that we're having these massive flu outbreaks in high population density areas in Southern California. So definitely very interesting.
So, and our population density up here is not that high, and we have not been hit nearly as hard as they have. These are my colleagues in LA and San Diego.
Yeah, so, you know, reading your book, you know, I knew diabetes was a big deal, but in reading your book, I was just like, holy cow, it's like a huge deal. So $1.3 trillion annually worldwide just for dealing with this mess of diabetes. And the other thing, Julie, do you want to talk about the kind of major risk of diabetes that very few are talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I knew I wouldn't remember all the scary facts that they're in the book, but I actually wrote a few down for your audience because I think it is very telling. So basically, there's a study out of UCLA recently, and it says that 46% of the population of California is pre-diabetic. So that's 46% of the state that in a few years will have diabetes that doesn't already have it.
Wow.
So, yeah, and there's 8.1 million Americans, so nationwide, 8.1 million Americans who currently are unaware of the fact that they have diabetes. Between 1990 and 2013, the diabetes rates, this is type 2 diabetes, of course, the diabetes rate rose by 71% in the US. So right there, that should lead you to wonder, well, why is that?
Yeah.
And I think that's where when you delve into alternative ideas of medicine and basically the light environment is a huge part of that. The CDC estimates that 82 million Americans will have type 2 diabetes by the end of 2026, and that 1 in 3 adults will have it by 2050, the rate we're going. So, you know, our book isn't just about diabetes and wounds, but of course it is a huge part because that is an epidemic for whatever reasons, which we get into as well. But just that is sort of what is up and coming, and it's terrifying. And I'm going to go on to talking about why getting a wound on the bottom of your foot or somewhere on your foot when you have diabetes is actually a huge predictor as to your mortality rate. So I got to find the exact number.
This just really blew me away, Julie. When I was reading about this, I had no clue about any of this.
Yeah.
So here's a stat for you. Up to 74% of patients die within 5 years of their first amputation. Okay, so more than 27% of diabetics will get a diabetic foot ulcer at some point in their lifetime. And of those, 15% will undergo an amputation. Okay, so let's say 15% of the 27% have now undergone an amputation. Well, within 5 years of that first amputation, 74% will have died.
So I think that is the mind-blowing thing right there, because there are so many people out there that are being told, oh, don't worry, you have type 2 diabetes, it's no problem, we'll just put you on some medication for it, not realizing that the next step down that pathway, and it's only typically a matter of time, they're going to get an amputation, or, well, they're going to get a wound. They don't take care of the wound, they can get an amputation, and their 5-year mortality rate is worse than many cancers. It's worse than
breast cancer, prostate
colon.
cancer,
it's crazy.
Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's worse than all of those.
Yeah, I had no idea. I read that. I was just like, holy cow.
I think currently diabetes is the 3rd leading cause of death in the U.S. after cancer and heart disease. And it used to be down at like 6th or 7th.
Yeah. And it's amazing that you have a disease, and it's not that the amputation is what kills them, although we've seen lots of people that have had amputations and have fallen and they lose their mobility, and it's absolutely miserable to live with an amputation for sure. But the fact that they need an amputation is just an indicator of their general health. And that's why learning to improve their health through some of the kind of basic quantum principles is so critical.
Yeah, so the one story,
also,
go on, Julie.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, it's also been studied that about 85% of all amputations were preventable. So this shouldn't have happened. So the reason that's significant in my line of work is if doctors or even just patients themselves just knew to get that patient to a wound center early on, earlier the better, they could have avoided that. Sometimes I'll get a patient who has gangrene set in the entire forefoot. There's a 30-day lapse before their insurance will even allow me to start hyperbaric oxygen therapy. It's a losing battle from the beginning, so they end up with an amputation. So I spoke to such a patient on the phone yesterday who I had treated. He came to me from a rehab facility. He'd had gangrenous toes. 4 of his toes were black, and they were just putting betadine on him. And then that wasn't the worst of it. He had a heel ulcer, didn't feel pain, but clearly ischemic pain he did feel, even though he has neuropathy from his diabetes. So he had the vascular disease that goes along with it. But that toe pain from ischemia and the heel pain were immense. And I said, you know what, I can't save everything, but I'm going to try to save your heel so you can end up just losing your toes, what we call a transmetatarsal amputation. It's terrible, but I mean, you know, explaining to him what I can do, what I can't do, you know, it's gone this long, this far. Why he didn't get referred to me before he got to rehab, I have no idea. It's just a matter of showing the physicians, the nurse practitioners and PAs how important it is. Any diabetic with a wound on their foot, early referral, you know, the sooner the better. So anyway, we worked towards getting his heel fixed. He was undergoing a lower extremity bypass. Unfortunately, the bypass did not produce enough blood flow to his heel, and he ended up having to undergo a below-knee amputation. And so when I spoke to him on the phone yesterday, he had gone from his amputation back to rehab for about a month, finally got home. He'd been home 2 weeks. He was so happy to be finally through all this. The phantom pain was there, but at least the ischemic pain was gone. So he saw that as a plus. And he was still positive. He said, you know, I know someday I'm going to walk again with prosthesis. It won't be by summer, but hopefully by next Christmas. So, I mean, he gets that it's a long, long road ahead of him. He doesn't know that, you know, the mortality statistics that I told you, that's nothing I needed to share with him. But I guarantee this guy's life is on the decline.
Right. Yeah, it's forever changed. So, Julie, a few minutes back, you said 85% of these amputations are preventable. So what are some simple things that people can be doing to never put themselves in this situation?
Yeah, and not to focus only on diabetes and wounds, because we see so many different types that we can help with, different, you know, ideas we have. But if a patient has diabetes and they form calluses because it's their body's protective way of, you know, thickening the skin over pressure areas, they need to have, you know, routine podiatry visits where someone is actually paring down the callus for them. They can be taught to do it themselves in a safe fashion, not to use anything sharp. They need to be told not to clip their own toenails, because countless times I've seen a patient who clipped their toenails too short. All it was a little cut on the end of their toe, and they say it bled. There was no wound there. I covered it with a Band-Aid, and then 3 days later I woke up and my foot was red hot and swollen, so I went to the ER. So if they didn't end up with an amputated toe from that admission, at least they ended up on antibiotics and referred to me. And sometimes already the wound is down to the bone. It can happen quickly depending on their health, you know, their ill health. So little things like foot inspections daily, the proper footwear, podiatry follow-ups, it's all about prevention. And if prevention has failed, it's all about getting yourself to a wound center if you have one in your area. And if not, I'm hoping that someone else who really doesn't have any access to that kind of a care can at least learn something from our website or from reading our book.
And that's where, Nathan, I'll put in a plug for our book. You know, half our book is written by Julie, and it's about what to do if you get a wound. Don't clip your toenails too tight or too close, etc. Inspect your feet. It includes a lot of information about different topical treatments and dressings and things. The other half is all about how these people need to work on their health using basic circadian biology and quantum biology principles. So, you know, the first thing that anybody can do is start looking at how can you get better health so that if you get a wound, it's not so dangerous and terrible. And even just the whole concept of circadian rhythms is, there's more and more research coming out on it every day. But you look around and you see people just breaking the basic laws of nature in terms of circadian biology constantly. Yeah. So the first thing those people can do is do exactly what you're doing. Get your blue blockers on after dark, and especially to, change your lighting in your home. Do all those things that we've all learned over the years make a difference in getting your health better to start with. And those aren't simple, and we've tried. We ran out of words in our book to describe them. I mean, we could have written a lot more, but we wanted to give people the basics.
Yeah, hey, excellent book.
A lot of patients who have wounds, they just think that's their only problem is, well, I have a wound on my body. And so it's a matter of retraining and reteaching and saying, look, I can do this, that, and the other for your wound, but it's your ill health that is reflected by your wound.
Right.
So your skin kind of can reflect your poor health to begin with. And so starting to talk to them about these things, which is difficult to do in a hospital-based clinic, but this is what we're doing for patients that come to see us or consult with us, is talking to them about all the different features they need. And as Jack talks about in our foreword, you need to try to live in an optimized environment. And it's not that difficult. I think he talked about, stand barefoot in the sun, get sunlight, do some grounding, a lot of things that can definitely make a difference.
Yeah, I think he said something along the lines of sunrises and sunsets are the prescription for wound healing, right. Something along those lines. Yeah. So real quick, hey, Rob, I want to tie this to something that you said about blocking blue light. So most people know that when you block blue light, it protects your melatonin levels. You get a better sleep. Right. Let's tie this to diabetes. What else does blue light do at night that leads to diabetes?
Great question. It creates insulin secretion. It directly ties to the pancreas. Blue light increases insulin secretion. Diabetes is a disease of insulin resistance. Too much light at the wrong time of day. And that's why I really worry about our current generation, because it's
insulin resistance, because there's insulin around all the time.
Right. The more insulin you have, the more likely your cells become habituated to it. That's insulin resistance to type 2 diabetes. And, it basically stimulates insulin production. And
hey, Rob, you were breaking up for a second there. Can you just kind of repeat those past 2 sentences you said, please?
So blue light stimulates insulin production.
Yeah.
And type 2 diabetes is a disease of insulin resistance, which means too much insulin production. And the best way to get rid of diabetes is to make your insulin go away. And there are a variety of techniques. And the first one involves changing your light environment. Cold is another tremendous technique. Intermittent fasting is a tremendous technique. And all those together constitute a prescription for diabetes reversal. I mean, there's more to it, obviously, but blue light stimulates insulin production and therefore will be driving diabetes rates well into the future, unfortunately, for the population.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
great job security for doctors and drug companies. But
right. Yeah, I mean, so many ticking time bombs here with just all these kids constantly glued to their phones, and adults too. I know a lot of adults that are constantly on their phone too at night. They never take any precautions. So I mean, you guys just heard it from 2 ER doctors, anti-aging wound care specialists, that just getting this blue light in your eyes at night is driving these diabetes rates, which are currently costing $1.3 trillion globally annually. And that number is set to increase. Yep. And you go from type 2 diabetes to type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's disease, dementia. Yep. So, this I can't stress this enough, the importance of, just getting some orange glasses, looking a little odd at first. But, at some point when you don't have your orange glasses on, you're going to be the odd person. So I don't know when that's going to be, but hopefully sometime soon. So, hey, the other thing I'd love love to have you guys talk about is the impact of stress on healing.
Yeah.
Well, so, you know, for many, many years in the ER, so I'll kind of give you a little anecdote, which is all I learned in emergency medicine about hormones was that 18 to 25-year-old males have testosterone poisoning. And that's why they crash their motorcycles into, you know, trees at high rates of speed. In other words, what we do in the emergency medicine setting has very little to do with hormones. And people would come in and say, I'm really stressed out, and that's why I'm having this problem. And most doctors are sort of habituated into saying, oh, yeah, sure, you're right, but don't really get the mechanisms. And stress raises the hormone called cortisol. And cortisol has been shown to actually decrease your ability to heal. And so there's actually a study, and I'm blanking on the details, but they use, I think, dental students or medical students with wounds, and they figured out that they healed a lot more poorly during their final exams or during exam periods than when they were in non-exam periods.
Very interesting.
And, you know, cortisol is basically what we call a catabolic hormone. It contributes to breaking down body tissue, and it's doing that as a response to some kind of either physiologic or psychological stress in order to provide the body with emergency ability to escape. You know, I mean, the immediate effects of cortisol are to raise blood glucose, to start metabolizing sugar, to try to create fuel to run away from that tiger. The problem, of course, is we now live in a chronically stressful environment. And if people can't figure out a way to deal with that and their cortisol is always high, then they will suffer the effects of high cortisol, which ultimately becomes the brain deciding that's too much cortisol, and that shuts down, and that creates a syndrome that functional medicine doctors refer to as adrenal fatigue. The best prescription for fixing your cortisol is to use light. You know, what shuts down high cortisol is morning sunlight. Your cortisol goes up to wake you up in the morning, and once you start to see certain spectra of light, it starts to go down. And so I tell every single one of my patients that comes in here, and we test their cortisol and we see that they're either low or too high, the first thing I tell them is, before we consider any kind of supplements or anything else, you need to work on fixing your lifestyle. And by that, I mean, I want you outside first thing in the morning. I want you looking in the direction of the sun for 15 or 20 minutes. I want you turning off the lights at night. I want you going to bed, you know, and letting your melatonin take over, get flux on your computer, get blue blocking glasses. And most of them try it. Most of them are continuing it and having great results. There are a few people who say, I can't do all that stuff, sorry, and they usually don't do that well. But stress is huge, and it impacts healing and everything about your life.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the first things I work on with my clients is just getting their stress under control, because you can eat the best diet in the world, but if you have all this stress and you don't know how to manage it, you're never going to get better. Right. So, correct. Hey, Julie, Jack wanted me to ask about the Kruse and you bringing Max on the Kruse.
Oh, yeah. Anything more specific than that, Jack? Does he mean for me to tell anything about being on the Kruse, like having him there?
So what was your motivation to bring, is Max your son?
Oh, I think I know what he's talking about. Yes.
So what was your motivation to bring Max on the Kruse?
You know, he, of course, being at an age of, I don't know, maybe 13, 14, when we were making changes at home with our environment, and being a teenager, not very happy with it, you know, embarrassed to have friends come over because we didn't have normal lighting at night, you know, and in the summer it's fine, it's light out, but in the winter it's pretty much amber lights only after dark. Things like that, which he, you know, was rebelling against a little bit, but he's also intuitive, and he was the kind of kid who was out barefoot, he was out in the sun, he was staying as healthy as he could, he eats well, he drinks good water. We don't have to tell him much. He didn't have an iPhone until just recently, and he's always putting it in airplane mode before he puts it in his pocket, and he's a pretty good model that way. Makes me look bad, but he went on the Kruse, and meeting Jack Kruse, I think, was incredibly eye-opening, because he listened, And I think by the second or third day, he felt comfortable approaching or asking a few questions, and it really got him thinking. And he's on the student government this year, and the school just did a survey anonymously to all the students, and it's part of a Stanford research project to talk about what is it like for high school students. It talks about how much sleep do you get, how much homework, how often are you on social media. I didn't take the survey, but I assume it had a whole bunch to do with lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And I got the feedback from a student that I was interviewing for a college application, and he was privy to the results because he's the student body president. And he said the staff, when they tabulated the data just from our one high school here in Redding, California, they were just shocked. And I asked the student, were you shocked? And he says, not at all. He goes, I see it every day. But apparently the data was so eye-opening, things like, well, maybe starting school a little bit later, things like that might be in the works. But I think people are just coming around to realizing how unhealthy kids are and how sleep deprived and how it's affecting so much about their emotional and physical health. And I think for wound patients, a non-healing wound is definitely an indicator of poor health, of a stressed body. That stress is sometimes, as Rob mentioned, physiologic. It can be emotional stress. It can be psychological stress. Or, I have patients come to see me who have wounds and they're concurrently undergoing chemotherapy. They had breast cancer. They underwent a mastectomy. The mastectomy surgical incision has opened, won't heal, but they want to start chemotherapy. And I basically counsel them, here's what you need to do. Go ahead and start chemotherapy. We'll take care of your wound. It's going to take longer, but don't put that aside. And, whatever is higher risk, problem at the time is what you need to deal with, and we'll deal with whatever else. Other people are on high dose, autoimmune patients, rheumatoid arthritis, and they need to be on prednisone, methotrexate, medications that are going to definitely slow down their ability to heal their wound. So we have a lot of stresses that we have to overcome. Now, that $1.3 trillion cost to treat diabetes and diabetic wounds isn't without huge failure rates. And so if at any time there's 7 million Americans with a non-healing wound of any type, the costs are huge. And all we're really doing is treating a wound. We're not treating 7 million people unless they have a functional medicine doctor working with them. So that's kind of where I was seeing that with all the new therapies, with all the advanced technologies and the gold standard of care I was giving, the best practices that I follow at the wound center, I am not able to, at a hospital-based clinic, offer half of the therapies that we do in our outside practice, which we can go into and which are in the book. But the alternative therapies, there's no FDA approval. There's no research data because there's been no funding for such things. And yet they've been around for centuries in other countries, very effectively helping people heal. Yeah. And things that are completely free, like sunlight and good sleep and good water.
Yeah. The Kruse was eye-opening for our family because our kids got to meet Dr. Kruse and learn directly from him. And I remember Max coming home and logging into his website and doing a post, and that's the last time he did because he doesn't spend any more time on the computer than he has to. But what a change. It changed him a lot. Like I say, now we'll go home tonight. It was 3 o'clock when we started this year. We'll get home at 5 or 6, and he'll be in his blue blocking glasses, and he'll be turning off. We have a switch on our Wi-Fi. We turn it off unless we're actively using it. We try to avoid using it unless it's absolutely necessary for certain homework things. Mm-hmm. He'll be the one that turns it off every night for us, right?
Oh yeah, he'll come downstairs.
He'll be like, "Did you guys turn the Wi-Fi off yet?"
Yeah,
he's great.
He's the Nazi.
That's awesome. I love it. So
you
cool.
Learned a lot.
Hey, so Rob, you're doing some very interesting things with anti-aging medicine, and so like with stem cell therapy and platelet-rich plasma. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
So I went through and did a stem cell fellowship through the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine and learned how to harvest autologous stem cells, so both bone marrow and adipose-derived stem cells. So autologous means taking them from a patient. So I'm able to take either bone marrow or fat tissue from a patient, both of which contain stem cells, and separate out and isolate the cells and redeploy them back into that patient. And the reason that's helpful is sometimes for orthopedic conditions, and specifically arthritis of the knees, knees, hips, and shoulders, that can be very helpful. It can help people either prevent or avoid entirely a joint replacement surgery, which I think is a wonderful thing, because when somebody replaces your joint with a piece of titanium, you end up messing with the electrical currents in your body, and you also end up developing the chance of a titanium allergy. Mm-hmm. I also work with Platelet-Rich Plasma, which is a very simple sort of regenerative medicine technique. We were able to take someone's blood and spin it down and isolate the fraction of the plasma, which is the watery portion of blood, and make a concentrated solution of that with lots of their platelets. And although people think of platelets as the cells in your blood that clot your blood, which is true, they also contain about 28 different growth factors that basically start the healing process. So oftentimes when people have a tendinitis or a shoulder injury, like a rotator cuff injury, or some arthritis, or say a tennis elbow or something like that, an injection of platelet-rich plasma, which is also called PRP, can actually kind of get them over the hump to really let their body heal it on its own. So I love these techniques because they allow us to use the resources and the wisdom of people's own bodies to heal themselves. And of course, both of those techniques, both stem cells and PRP, are incredibly helpful for wound healing, right? Because what happens in a wound when it stalls, or any sort of an injury, the injury stalls, maybe our bodies don't have quite the redox potential to heal that. So if we can bring some of your own cells back to that site that have extra healing capacity and inject them or deploy them there, it can really heal things without having to resort to surgery, or worse yet, steroid injections, which maybe make the pain go away for a few weeks or a few months, but actually ultimately cause problems with the adrenal axis and also weaken the tissue. So those are the kind of things I'm doing in medicine right now, and I really love to do. It's very gratifying and exciting to help people heal themselves with those techniques.
Yeah, very exciting for sure. So, I've read some articles about people having some bad experiences. So what are just a few recommendations for people? Because there's a lot of kind of like these fly-by-night operations, people unqualified to be doing these therapies. What are some recommendations for people that are out there trying to research this, that just don't know a whole lot about it because it's so new?
Great questions. I'm a fly-by-night operator. Just kidding. I'm not. No, I think the challenge with stem cell therapy is that it sounds really cool and amazing and awesome. And so it's marketed aggressively, and most people don't really know much about it. And so there are unscrupulous people taking advantage of that and selling expensive procedures to people, and not able to really speak to what the results will be like, or maybe even just, I've heard, for example, of people being told they were getting stem cell therapy and just getting PRP or platelet-rich plasma. So I think if anybody out there is considering stem cell therapy, the first thing you need to do is work on optimizing your body the best you can. And there's lots of information that Nathan and others have shared about that. But the next thing is look for a doctor that's had some specific training in stem cell therapy, and by that I mean a fellowship. Sit down with that person. If you're looking at an expensive procedure, and these are expensive procedures because they're still considered experimental, they're not FDA approved, they're not covered by insurance, so it's usually cash out of pocket. You deserve to have that doctor be able to look you in the eye and answer your questions and explain in detail where they got trained, what type of cases they've done, what their results have been like, and basically what the procedure is. And, I think I would beware of aggressively hyped marketing seminars with clinics where they just kind of run you through like a factory. I mean, you want to be able to have somebody that you trust. So it's like any medicine, you need to be able to trust the person providing, unless you're an expert yourself.
Right. Okay. Awesome.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, totally. Hey, so one of the things I really love about your book, guys, is there's a lot of emphasis on empowering the patient. So Julie, do you want to talk to that a little bit and also talk about personal responsibility when it comes to just taking care of your health in general?
Sure. I think in mainstream medicine, patients are conditioned to listen to their doctor and do what they say. And what they say is usually what they have time to discuss, i.e., okay, here's your diagnoses. We're adding 2 new medications. And by the way, those are needed now because of the side effects of the other medications. They never talk about how to, prevent, let's say, what's the word I'm looking for? To get rid of their diabetes, to actually cure themselves, improve it, cure it, to try to get them off medications. And so empowering them to say, work with your physician, but use your own intuition, ask your questions, do your own research, see what else is out there, try new things, work with a doctor who wants to talk about non-pharmaceutical therapies to help your problems, your conditions. And in doing so, you're empowering the patient and you're working with them and you're letting them make decisions. For example, we have a friend visiting us from England right now, and he came here to see us for wounds, which are more of a autoimmune rash condition. And he is an engineer, incredibly bright, and he is asking all the right questions. And it's actually really challenging for us. He understands what we're saying when we don't talk too medically, but it empowers him when we can give him something to then go and research before he will blindly follow anything or say, I want to do that. And that's how it should be. It should be a give and take. And it's sort of like working with our kids. It's like you give a little bit at a time and let them figure it out and say, you know what, I do sleep better now. And that makes me feel better. And that gives me, more optimism. And I feel more positive about how I'm doing and I'm seeing my wound heal. So I'm going to keep going. There's some sense in this because it's working. And I have, on the flip side of that, I have patients come in. I'll give you an example. This happens all the time. It's usually an elderly gentleman, just to be stereotypical, but they'll come in with their diabetic foot ulcer, and week after week after week, their wound may be improving. It's certainly not worsening. I'm keeping their foot on intact, but it's not really getting where it should be. And I know why. They're not complying with my instructions. The wife will admit it. They're still walking on their foot when they're home. When they come in, they're wearing their offloading shoe or they're in their wheelchair, but the rest of the time they're not. And they always ask me, Doc, when are you going to heal my wound? And that is their attitude is, it's up to me to heal them. 100% is on me. Mm-hmm. No responsibility at all of their own. And, those are a certain population of patients, and you just deal with them. And then you get the patient who is very proactive and, asking questions and wanting to do better. And those are the fun patients because we can take them so much farther and so much faster and really see their wounds heal.
And I think in a fragmented and difficult to access modern medical system that's extremely focused on pharmaceuticals, people have to take control of their health. They have to try to learn what it takes to empower themselves because they're not, unfortunately, going to get the right answer most of the time when they get seen. They may get a prescription. And I want to take a minute to say that we both work with a lot of doctors. I mean, there's probably 200 doctors in our community. We know most of them pretty well. And they are fantastically hardworking, well-meaning people who oftentimes sacrifice their own lives, their family lives, their sleep, their health, unfortunately, taking care of people, but they're working in a system using a paradigm that doesn't really work for many people. And so most folks aren't going to get the information they need from a doctor these days. So they need to empower themselves. They need to take some responsibility. And to go back to our patient who's visiting us from England, I was talking to a patient a couple weeks ago in my office, and I said, we were talking about some techniques to help her turn around some autoimmune disease, and her hemoglobin A1C is high, and we talked about light, et cetera. And I said, well, why don't you try this intermittent fasting? Maybe you should skip, let's pick a meal every day and skip that for a week and see what happens. And she said, I could never miss a meal. It's not possible. So the alternative is our patient from England a week ago decided, based on some discussions we had, that he wanted to try fasting. And so he stopped eating. And it's been 6 days.
Wow.
This is a fantastically committed
6 days?
Yeah.
Holy
not
cow.
a drop of, not a bit of food, just water. And he's doing very well. And he's trying to reset his immune system and trying to wake up his senescent mitochondria and go through mitochondrial autophagy and all the things that fasting does. And, you know, so this is a gentleman who is empowering himself. You know, he is taking responsibility for his health, and he's doing it. And it just blows me away. We've got a 7-year-old guy who's doing something that I've had patients tell me, I could never, you know, miss a meal, or I could never do this, or I could never do that. And, you know, it's all up here.
Totally.
It's in your head, basically.
Yeah.
It's what you're willing to do.
Right. So many people have it so ingrained that, oh, I can never miss a meal. Like, I'll die if I miss a meal.
Right.
This guy,
it's easier to take my metformin.
He's still alive. What was that, Emily?
Yeah.
I said it's easier to take my metformin every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Rather than have to try to, you know, fast for 5 days.
And that's the sad thing. The system we're in has socialized both patients to expect and doctors to prescribe pharmaceuticals rather than to ask people to do the hard work of changing their lifestyles and seeking health that way. And yet the pharmaceutical prescription only works for certain things and doesn't work for the chronic diseases that are kind of sneaking up on all of us. Some of us faster than others.
Yeah. So there you go, folks. Personal responsibility. Don't be afraid to fire your doctor and find some doctors like Julie and Rob that actually teach you how to heal, teach you how to reverse disease, get off pharmaceuticals, get off these drugs. Because there are good doctors out there. I've had to fire a few doctors myself, and I've been very fortunate that I've found some very caring and awesome doctors that are, you know, doing research on the latest things that actually help people get better and not just putting them on a prescription for the rest of their lives. So I want to thank you guys for doing what you do. It's awesome. We need more doctors like you guys. And what do you say to other doctors out there that are struggling? You know, they're not equipped with what they learned in med school to treat their patients. What recommendations, what advice do you have for these doctors?
Keep reading. You know, get outside the mainstream and keep reading and just learn more about some natural and alternative therapies. And, you know, you can question and wait for data and results, and that's fine. But in some cases, it's not going to be forthcoming in the way that we're used to in our medical training. Randomized controlled trials, you know, placebo-controlled trials, they may not exist for some of the things that we're talking about. Obviously not for sunlight and blue blocking glasses, but things that it makes sense, and they should just learn about it and at least try to fit some of that in when they have a consultation with a patient.
Always be curious. You know, keep looking for the answers when things aren't making sense, when the therapies that you've been taught don't seem to really solve the problem. Keep looking, get online. The internet, for all I grouse and whine about Wi-Fi and social media and the internet, there's a tremendous amount of learning, but people have to be open-minded and curious, and doctors need to be open-minded and curious also. And unfortunately, most of them are just working so hard at keeping the day-to-day thing going that they don't. And so I just encourage that, open-minded and curious.
Okay.
What usually starts them in asking us questions and hearing about what we're up to is when they'll call me because their mother or father has a wound and they need some advice. And it's a great segue into what we're up to. And then they get really curious. And then we say, hey, here's a copy of our book. And then they're like, wow, we had no idea.
And I actually thought most of my colleagues, we gave copies of our book to a lot of our colleagues. Most of them would go, this is all crazy. But actually, a lot of them come back and ask questions like, really? I've never heard this. I didn't know this. And a lot of them are actually asking those kind of questions. So I think we're on the right track.
Yeah, I love it. Excellent. Hey, well, guys, thanks so much. Anything else you want to share with the audience before we finish up this call?
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, we're just getting started in this. We'd love to have people check out our book. You can go to our website. It's www.healingyourwound.com. We promise not to spam you too badly if you sign up for free reports and things, but we're going to try to continue to be on the cutting edge of learning and passing along what we know with quantum health principles. And we just appreciate everybody checking it out. And thinking outside the box and being curious. So thank you.
And for spreading the word if they do know of somebody who needs help with a wound.
Please do.
Yeah, so healyourwound.com. That's your website.
Healingyourwound.com.
Healingyourwound.com.
Healing.
The book is Wound Healing Secrets. Excellent book. You know, I don't have diabetes, but there's a ton of useful stuff that I learned in here for me and for my clients. So buy it for somebody you know that has a non-healing wound, that has diabetes, and buy it for your doctor. You know, if your doctor's just pushing pills, give your doctor this book and tell them, hey, by the way, it's written by 2 other MDs. But if you guys found value in this Facebook Live, please share it. Get the word out so we can help other people heal themselves, be healthier, live a happier life, and all that good stuff. So, Julie and Rob, thanks again. I had a really fun time. And, you know, I'd love to do this again at some point in the future if you guys are up for it.
Absolutely. And we'll be doing a podcast. So we'd love to have you on our podcast sometime too, Nathan, and hear about your journey.
Yeah.
Because I think we're all on a journey to health together. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
awesome,
thank you very much, Nathan.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome. But you guys have a great night, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay, sounds great. You too.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Everyone. Oh, and just real quick, so coming up in future Facebook Lives, I've got Beth Lambert, who is, I forget the name of her book, but Beth is behind a documentary called Documenting Hope. But Beth has devoted a lot of her research to helping children with diseases like autism and other childhood disease. But, you know, just like Julie and Rob are helping people actually heal, Beth is doing the same thing, but with children. She's doing some really great work. I had the pleasure of seeing her speak in Vermont 2 years ago. She spoke before Jack. And then this weekend, I'm also going to do a short Facebook Live with a good friend of mine, Ryan Gavlik, who is a personal trainer. He is going to teach you how to tighten your booty. So Ryan has some really kind of innovative techniques that are very simple. I use some of his techniques because I have, you know, kind of bad posture. I'm on my computer too much, you know, burning my eyes out with blue light. But I have a lot of neck and shoulder tension. I did some of these exercises from my buddy Ryan and totally loosened me up, made a huge difference. So join me Saturday at noon and then next Wednesday, same time. So thanks, good night, and I'll see you guys soon.
Good night. Thanks all.